he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? My man Taz 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. So we've got a bit to talk about. Obviously, we've got the Wanderers women. They're in double action this week, as well as Liverpool. They've got 2 games as well. And the Wanderers men also have a game earlier midweek. Actually, we're starting recording this episode midweek. So we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, we can talk about Seattle later as well. Lots to talk about. So let's get started with the episode. I was going to wear my old Titans jersey on this week, but I had to wear the Wanderers jersey because we're going to talk about them. We're going to start with the men because the men have only got one game to talk about. They go up against Macarthur Bulls. They were playing at home. And it was a 1-0 loss. Again, it's another loss for the Wanderers men's team. Macarthur scored in the 41st minute, so just a couple of minutes before half-time. And yeah, they were pretty average. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, they just beat Macarthur, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. In fact, actually, let me go back through. So if I go back to, like, round 5, no, that's Central Coast, 6, that's the Sydney Derby. But yeah, I'm sure that we played against Macarthur and we did reasonably well against that. We got a 1-1 draw in Campbelltown. And we're lucky to get a point out of that game, if I remember correctly. But yeah, 1-0 loss to Central Coast, to Macarthur. So again, that leaves us adrift from the top 6 because Newcastle Jets ended up getting a good win over Auckland FC, but at the moment, before obviously other games are played this week, because there's quite a few that are going to catch up. There's one that plays today with Victory and Perth. There's one tomorrow, 2 tomorrow, and 1 on Sunday. Then we got 1 on Monday and 1 on Tuesday for this. So for the current round of round 11, it finishes on Sunday. Then we got extra games for round 17 and round 20 playing during the midweek. So obviously they might be playing those games for Macarthur, who's involved in the Monday game, and Melbourne City in the Tuesday game, because obviously they've got other commitments in terms of the AFC Champions League type of thing, competition. But that does leave the Wanderers second last still on 9 points, 8 goals for and 14 goals against. And it's pretty disappointing. The next game, obviously, for the Wanderers is not until the 10th of January, so that's not this weekend but next weekend. It'll be this weekend coming after this episode goes up. And it's against Melbourne Victory. So Melbourne Victory at the moment, they got a big win late last week. So they're up to 7th position, 1 point outside the top 6. So it's not going to be an easy game for us really, for the Wanderers. And we are playing away from home. We're playing at Amy Park, so playing in Melbourne. And then our next game after that, I think, would be Sydney Derby. Jets at home. Jets at home, Combank. But it's pretty disappointing. I hope with the bye type of situation, they're obviously playing, um, you know, playing on New Year's Day, and then we don't play until the 10th. Hopefully, they can use this time to kind of rest up a little bit, train a lot better, get some passing game going because they're very static at the moment. They're not moving a lot, and they're not scoring enough goals. Because again, like I said, 8 goals, and we're now officially in last in terms of goals scored this year. In fact, it's the difference is 2 to Perth. Obviously, Perth have got to play. They're going to play today. Yeah, they're going to play today at the time of this recording because they play on Friday. So they could up that, and then next after that is Brisbane and Melbourne City, both with 11, and Central Coast, I should say, as well, all on 11 goals for. And we're very lucky that Central Coast did lose to Brisbane earlier this week, otherwise we would have been down the bottom. Which, honestly, with the way that they've been playing recently, they kind of deserve it. I know I kind of went like this when I was talking about the Gold Coast Titans as well. But the way that they have been playing recently in terms of the Wanderers, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's because there's so many new signings and they're not gelling together. There's so many people out of position. I don't know what's going on. I don't know whether they're training or not because it feels like it's like, oh yeah, we're going to training and they're not actually doing anything because the results are not coming on the board. We're not scoring. We're not defending well. We're not passing well. We're not attacking the ball. You know, we're attacking the ball, but very late in games, which is not one thing that you need to do if you're down by like 3 or 4 goals. You know, like, or 2 goals in a game when you got 10 minutes left. You know, yes, it was only 1-0 in this game, and ultimately they played from behind for most of the half. Like the second half, they had all the time in the world to, you know, score an equaliser at least, if not score a winning goal as well. But they just didn't do it, and I don't know what is going on. Coach is very much in the hot seat right now. Ultimately, you can give Central Coast a little bit of a break. Yes, they're at the bottom, but their coach did leave them like right before the season started, so they're kind of in a situation where they're kind of in a bit of flux. But winning 2 games out of the 11 that you've played is not good enough. Like, yes, we've had 3 draws, but we've been very lucky with some of those draws as well. They could be counted as losses, like at least probably 1 or 2 of those. So there'd be 8 losses on the season, and that'd be, 2 points off. So we'd be in 7 points at the moment if we took those off. And honestly, they deserve the wooden spoon right now because they are not playing cohesively. They're not playing as a team, and I don't know what the coach is doing. Coach could get sacked at this point in time. Who knows? Because we're like almost halfway through the season. Because we've got, 27 rounds this year? 26 rounds. So we've played 11 games already. So we're almost at the halfway mark, and being, 6 points off the pace at this point in time, obviously with other results pending at the moment for teams at the moment. But ultimately, of course, I'll let you guys know at the end of the episode how that stacks out. But being, a couple of games away from the halfway point and being in second last position, and with a big gap between last and second last and the top 6, that gap is only going to get bigger if they're not performing, and that's something that they cannot do, and it's pretty disappointing. Newcastle Jets ended up winning 3-1 against Auckland FC away from home as well. They were playing in New Zealand, which is a big result for them. But yeah, it's disappointing to say the least for the Wanderers men's team. And we might as well talk about the women as well, the Wanderers women's team. Obviously, I will be talking about them later this week as well, because I think they do have another game this weekend. But they did go up in the midweek on Tuesday. Obviously, it's Friday when I'm recording this. And I will make an addendum towards the end of this segment just to talk about the second game that the Wanderers will play. But they played on the 30th of December. They played at home against Wellington Phoenix, and it was 1-0 at halftime against the Wanderers. It ended up being 3-0 at full time. So Phoenix scored in the 7th minute, the 48th minute, and the 52nd minute. And I got to say, the defense on all three of those goals was pitiful. It was very much like the game last week for the Wanderers, where the defense was just not there. So realistically, it's 8 goals. I think it's 8 goals to 2. I think in the last 2 games against the bottom 2 teams for the Wanderers. So it's 5-2. So against Adelaide, and then where's the other result? Round 10. And then, 3-0. So it's 8 goals to 2 in the last 2 games against the bottom 2 sides in the league, which was Adelaide, and Wellington was down there as well. They just jumped everybody with that win. A 3-0 win, add that as well, to jump a lot of teams near the bottom. So after 8 games, we've only won 1 game this year, and we're down the bottom with 4 points. And it's pretty pitiful. And again, it's top spot versus bottom spot coming up on the 3rd of January. So actually playing tomorrow when I'm recording this, with Canberra United being on top. And it's pretty disappointing to say the least for the Wanderers, because I don't know what it is about this women's team that's just finding it hard to win games or being competitive in a lot of games. But it's just the results are not coming on the board, and I don't know what the issue is. Obviously, it's goal scoring as well, because the goal scoring is almost the worst. Again, Sydney FC is still on the bottom with 5, but they're still going to play this coming week. They play against Melbourne City, which is a big game for both clubs there. But yeah, we are playing at home against Canberra United, so Canberra United do have to travel, but they usually travel well because they've only lost 2 games so far this year, and one of those was very, very close towards the end of that game. So it's not going to get any easier. Obviously, 8 goals to 2s, 4 goals per game basically, whereas we've scored 1 per the games in the last 2 games, and it's pretty disappointing. I feel like the women have kind of showed a little bit more fight than the men in some instances in some of these the past month, which is saying a lot for this team that is at the bottom, 3 points adrift from second last, and it's 6 points adrift as well to the top 6. So I don't know what's going to go on, but hopefully they play better against Canberra United, but we'll see. Obviously, it's top spot against bottom spot. I'm expecting a dropping, so we'll see what happens. I'll talk about that just after this segment, but we'll talk about it. So here's that amendum to the Wanderers women. Obviously, we talked about them playing earlier this week, but they did play again this weekend. They played against Canberra United. It's officially Monday when I'm recording this part. And despite it all, it was a 1-1 draw, and they played relatively well. They were actually behind relatively early in this game. Canberra scored in the 9th minute of the game, and credit to the Wanderers. They played really damn well all game. I watched pretty much, I think, the last 30 minutes of the second half, and they scored in the 70th minute off of the 3 subs. They're actually subbed on relatively close to each other in the last about 5-10 minutes before that. They all passed to each other, and it was a good shot going from right to left into the bottom left corner, and they salvaged a point from the game. And Canberra, were kind of dotted with a couple of calls, I think. There was one that was in the box that could have been 50-50, maybe should have been a penalty to Canberra United from the spot. But there was some against the Wanderers as well in the game. So, we salvage a point. We do go to 5 points. We do stay on the bottom of the ladder with that. But he's saying that we are still only 4 points behind second last, which actually is now Sydney FC, because Sydney FC lost. So going into obviously the end of the round for the women, it's Canberra United on top with 18 points, so they didn't actually drop out of top spot. Second was Melbourne City with 16. Then third is Melbourne Victory, so they actually drop a spot, but they are on the bye. They were on the bye over the weekend, partially because obviously they played earlier in the week. They're also on 16 points, just obviously the goal difference, whereas Melbourne City is 8, plus 8, and Melbourne Victory is plus 5. So that's why Melbourne City has jumped them into second position. Fourth position is Central Coast Mariners with 14. Then Wellington in fifth position with 12. Then Perth Glory also on 12 points in sixth position. It's just goal difference there, and obviously for Wellington it's positive, it's plus 9. Whereas Perth, it's the opposite, it's minus 6. Then the next group, obviously 7th position is Brisbane on 10. Then followed by Adelaide United in 8th position, also on 10 points, and Newcastle Jets in 9th, also on 10 points. And then Sydney FC being in 10th position with 9, and then the Wanderers obviously on 5 points with a second draw to their campaign. So next up, they play on Friday. They play Friday coming against Perth Glory away. They play in Perth. So pretty interesting situation because it is 6 versus last. But I think if the Wanderers play anywhere as close as they have in this game for the rest of the season, they could snag a few wins. They could snag a few teams that will, ultimately just, they'll play their games against them, and we'll kind of, think, we'll win easily against the Wanderers, and they'll surprise a few of those teams if they play relatively well. And if they play in the intensity as much as they did against Canberra United, now Canberra United themselves didn't play relatively well. They played all right. They didn't play their best game, but they played up tempo. They played with a lot of attack. The defense was a little bit scrappy in areas, but they played all right. And obviously, the Wanderers played a lot better than Canberra United did. Even though, yes, Canberra did come away with a point and didn't drop out of top spot. They would have liked to add the 3 points because obviously it was top spot versus bottom spot. So they kind of underestimated the Wanderers a little bit, and the Wanderers kind of made them pay a little bit, which is good. So for them, if they play as well as they did, the Wanderers women's team will look at, snagging a couple wins if they can manage it, and they won't finish with 1 win if they keep playing with that intensity against a lot of the teams for the rest of the competition. At this point, with the men's, obviously I'll give an update on that. There's still a couple of games left in the round in terms of the men's competition. Got one for today when I'm recording on Monday, Macarthur versus Auckland FC, and then one tomorrow, which is Melbourne City versus Brisbane. So at this point in time, the Wanderers are still at the bottom of the ladder. In fact, actually, they moved to the bottom of the ladder with 9 points, with 11 games played so far. And then obviously they play against Melbourne Victory this week coming up. No, that's the wrong, round 12. Thank you. They play on Saturday at Amy Park. Because for some reason, if you can see on the thing, so it goes from round 11 to round 17. So the round 17 clash between Auckland FC and Macarthur is playing today, and then round 20's clash of Melbourne City and Brisbane is playing tomorrow. So it's kind of the app is kind of weird when it does that. So it's a weird situation, but obviously, I think all the games have been played relatively for the rounds that have come up. The only game, obviously, Auckland FC and Sydney FC are behind by a game, but obviously they've got that game still to play. That obviously was to be determined on where it was going to be played a couple of weeks back. So they're obviously got a game in hand. So at the moment, obviously it's Auckland FC on top with 20 points. You got Sydney FC in second with 19. Then Brisbane in third with 18. And then Macarthur Bulls in fourth position with 18. Melbourne Victory in fifth position with 17 points. They've actually kind of turned their season around a little bit with a couple of wins. Sixth position is Newcastle Jets with 15, followed by Adelaide United also on 15 points in seventh. Then Melbourne City in eighth position with 14, as well as Wellington also on 14 points in ninth position. Then Perth with 13 in 10th. Then Central Coast Mariners with 11 points in 11th position. And then obviously the Wanderers on the bottom with 9 points leading into this weekend. So it's pretty interesting where things are going to go for the Wanderers, especially the Wanderers women, because if they turn it up, 1-1 draw against the ladder leaders in Canberra United, if they can play with that intensity, a lot of the games coming up might snag a few wins, might probably obviously snag a few draws, which obviously will help with points. And points are hard to come by for this team at the moment, but they play relatively well, they might get a couple of wins, which for them will turn their whole season around. And even if they don't make finals, if they get close and give themselves a chance, winning a couple more games will be a lot better, because I think they only won 2 games last season. So they're 1 win away of tying that and 2 wins away from actually getting ahead of that. So we'll see what happens with them. But 1-1 draw against the ladder leaders in Canberra United, who played relatively well, and obviously the Wanderers played relatively well as well. Commend them for that. Commend their effort, because the men need to follow suit, because they have not been playing that well, and it shows. But 1-1 draw against Canberra United at home for the Wanderers women over the weekend. Pretty good result. And obviously another segment that needs to be amended is, of course, Liverpool. Obviously they played their first game this morning. At the time of this recording, they played this morning. And it was a 0-0 draw to Leeds United. Once again, another draw to Leeds United. And it was just yellow cards for Leeds players, and that was really all the key moments there. I think they did have an opportunity late that was called offside, Leeds United, so Liverpool could have lost. But not an ideal result. Still staying fourth in terms of the league table. Obviously, all the games are played for the upcoming games. So Liverpool at the moment are still in fourth position. Arsenal did get a big win over Aston Villa, broke Aston Villa's 11-game winning streak in all competitions. Manchester City dropped points against Sunderland. They ended up getting a 0-0 draw as well, which is a great result for Sunderland. Let's be real, because ultimately that was always going to be one of the toughest games of the year for them. Obviously the Arsenal game is probably the one that's coming. That's for them earlier this season is probably one of the big ones. But Manchester City obviously being dominant as they have been over the last 8, 9, almost the last decade. You'd have to say, against Sunderland, who just got promoted from the Championship into the Premier League again, and they're striking well. getting a point off of Manchester City in a draw is fantastic for them, and I feel like that is a great result for them, and I congratulate them on that result. Yes, it's a draw, but it is a draw against a really, really tough side, and again, second position in the Premier League, where they're in 7th right now. So they're fighting really, really hard. I will say another notable result was Manchester United. They played against Wolverhampton Wolves, and it ended up being a draw as well in that game. So pretty funny in that. So Wolves finally, their losing streak gets broken, and they move to 3 points from 19 games. So Manchester United still stay ahead in 6th position ahead of Sunderland because of that point, but that's not a great result for them either. So, that's the relegated side basically at this point. Because unless they win a few games, they're not going to get out because they're behind by 15 points right now. Which obviously Nottingham Forest is in 17th on 18 points. So Wolves have had to really turn it around to get out of the relegation zone at this point. Leeds in 16th position at the moment with 21 points. But again, we'll talk about that in the amendum segment, because obviously we got another game coming up against Fulham. We go to Craven Cottage for that. Craven Cottage, sorry. I don't know why I keep saying Craven's Cottage, because I say it all the time when it comes to that location, but that is not the name. It's Craven Cottage. So we're playing away from home against Fulham. So hopefully it'll be a better result, because Fulham dropped to 11th at the moment. With Everton having a decent win. They jump about 4 spots, I think. They jump right into 8th position, so they must have had a really good win up their sleeve. So, yeah, 0-0 draw against Leeds United, another draw against Leeds for the second time in 4 weeks. So not ideal, but again, points still still up for grabs, and just get a point out of it. But realistically, should have been a win, but we'll see what happens against Fulham later this week. And then obviously this is the amendment to Liverpool. Obviously we talked about them earlier this week, getting a draw against Leeds United. And it was also another draw in the weekend game against Fulham. In fact, actually, I was up for the first half of this game, and it ended up being a 1-0 scoreline to Fulham at half time. So I went to bed not very happy. But in saying that, they scored in the 17th minute. It went to VAR because it thought that it might have been offside. Then VAR confirmed that it was a goal to Fulham in the 18th minute. Then after that, Florian Wirtz scored in the 57th minute. That was shown to VAR. VAR confirmed it in the 60th minute. So it ended up being a goal. Then we thought we won it in the 4th minute of stoppage time with Cody Gakpo scoring a goal. Obviously, he got a yellow card because he took the jersey off, thinking that he'd won the game. Obviously, very much like Alexander Isak kind of did last season with Newcastle, which was interesting. That come into mind, and obviously the equalising goal come pretty quickly against Newcastle in that game. And then in the 7th minute of stoppage time, Harrison Reed scored the equaliser for Fulham. So Fulham salvage a point, and that means Liverpool drop points again. They did not drop position though, in terms of the table. And actually, there's a few different movements in terms of the table, and even some, obviously that's not movements in terms of position on the ladder, but actually in terms of points. So Arsenal stay on top, 6 points clear on 48 points. Second is Manchester City on 42. It's just their goal difference is over Aston Villa, who's also on 42 points in 3rd position. It's 26 goals for in the positive for Manchester City, whereas +9 for Aston Villa, obviously partially due to that loss against Arsenal earlier this week. Liverpool in 4th position on 34 points, so it is an 8-point gap between 3rd and 4th position at the moment. Goals difference of +4, so that's a positive, I guess, for Liverpool. Chelsea in 5th position in 31 points, and better goal difference than Manchester United, who were in 6th position, also on 31 points. Just +11 for Chelsea, +4 for Man United. Excuse me. Sorry, my nostril on my left side is just a bit stuffy in just that second as I was talking. Brentford move up to 30 points and move up to 7th position. Then Sunderland drop a position to 8th position, also on 30 points. Just obviously goal difference there for Brentford with +4 and Sunderland with +2. So that's the only reason why Sunderland are going down. Newcastle jump to 9th position on 29 points. In fact, actually that is not really surprising with the group that's actually coming up, because Newcastle in 9th with 29 points. Then Brighton move up to 10th position with 28. Fulham stay at 11th. Everton dropped to 12th, also on 28 points. So if Brighton right through to Everton is 28 points. Then 27 points, and 13th position is Tottenham Hotspur, followed by Crystal Palace, also on 27. So realistically, when it comes to a win in that position, I'm assuming Newcastle were on 26, so they would have been right down in 14th position, would have jumped about 5 or 6 teams to jump in the 9th position. So that congestion right there, making it into the top 10 is pretty telling, because there's not a lot of points between them. In fact, like I said, it's 3 or 4 points between 9th position and 14th position at the moment. Then 15th with Bournemouth with 23 points. Leeds in 16th position with 22 points in a draw against Manchester United. So that didn't help Manchester this week, because they've had 2 draws, one against obviously Wolverhampton, the other one against Leeds. Excuse me. Then 17th position is Nottingham Forest with 18. Then hasn't been some movement in the relegation zone. Obviously, it's still West Ham in 18th position with 14 points. Burnley with 12 points in 19th position. But Wolves, as I said, had a draw against Manchester United, so they ended up getting a point, so they ended up going to 3 points earlier this week, as I mentioned in the clip beforehand in the Liverpool section. But they also got a win. They actually got a win, their first win of the season against West Ham at home. So they actually played relatively well and actually have doubled their points, and actually more than doubled their points this week than they have for the rest of the season, because obviously they went into this week with 2 points to their name, and they're at 6 points now. And 6 points out of being out of bottom position in the relegation zone. Obviously, they've got 12 points between them and Nottingham Forest to get out of the relegation zone, and even then, they need to score another 12 goals on top of what they have, because they got minus 26 goals compared to minus 14 when it comes to Nottingham Forest. So good on Wolverhampton for getting that first win on the season, and obviously doubling their points for the season so far. Relatively good result for them, because, like I said with the Wanderers women, and the fact that they played against Canberra United, obviously top spot versus bottom spot, getting a draw out of that could salvage things. Obviously Manchester United in the top 6 or 7. They got a draw against them and they ended up getting a win. Yes, it was a team in the relegation zone, but in saying that, still, you got to get wins, and you got to play well, and they did, and they got a win against West Ham. You got to put away sides that obviously, against, you have a situation where you can put a team away, and they did. They ended up putting 3 on West Ham as well, Wolverhampton. So congrats to them. Obviously Liverpool staying in 4th position, which is great for them. Didn't drop a position despite dropping points. it's going to be a very interesting week coming up because we play against Arsenal on Friday, my time at 7 a.m. in the morning. So we play against top spot, so it's a top four clash. Arsenal looking to extend their lead at the top of the table. Liverpool looking to stay in the top four, and hopefully, we can put a good result against Arsenal. Arsenal are flying high, but they might underestimate Liverpool. So we never know when it comes to a midweek, sort of weekend, early weekend-ish game. We'll see what happens. Because after that, we have a very action-packed week, the week after. And obviously the rest of the month is going to be very interesting in terms of January. But like I said, 2-2 draw to Fulham. Not ideal, especially after the 3-3 draw we had against Leeds United. Still got 2 points out of it, but playing against Arsenal next game, we'll see what happens, because it's going to be a very interesting week. And that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. I'd like to apologise, obviously kind of procrastinated a little bit this week with the episode. Could have recorded the Wanderers part yesterday, but I wanted to wait for the result for the last couple of games of the women's week, just to see what the positions of the teams were. Obviously give you a better gauge on where the ladder is, and especially for the men as well. Obviously, men, they've still got 2 games left technically this week, before actually right around when this episode actually will go up. And speaking of other miscellaneous stuff, obviously we got to talk about Seattle, because I did talk about them last week. Obviously it was a huge battle this week, number 1 seed in the NFC, which means that the team that would get the spot would have a week off of the playoffs, because obviously the playoffs start next week. The team that actually won the number 1 seed obviously will have the week off, go into the second week of playoffs. But not only that, they end up having a situation that they're playing at home with a home divisional game and possibly a home championship game if they end up winning that one. So it ends up going home, and you have home field advantage for possibly 2 playoff games if you end up going through the divisional round, which most of the time the 1 seed has relatively done that relatively well. So it's one of those things where it was a tough game. There was something that was going to be on the line for either team. We're talking about Seattle, and we're talking about the San Francisco 49ers. So obviously the Seattle Seahawks were playing away. They were playing in San Francisco. And it ended up being a win for Seattle. It ended up being a 13-3 win over the 49ers. And the Niners got held to 3 points all game. And ultimately it was the defense from both teams, but relatively for Seattle, that won them the game. And that's a fantastic result for Seattle, for my team. End up finishing the season with 14-3 rather, not 4-3, 14-3. So 14 wins, 3 losses. The only losses that they had this season, obviously, was the 49ers early on in the first week of the season. The Buccaneers, when they were actually playing relatively well, and it was only a couple-point loss, and then the 2-point loss to the Rams in their first matchup, and then obviously winning against the Rams in the second matchup, and then obviously winning against the 49ers in the last week of the regular season. So that means that the Seahawks will be having the week off next week, because the playoffs do start next weekend. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because obviously I think it's the lowest seed, plays Seattle. So ultimately, at this point, Seattle are the number 1 seed, with all the games finished at this point. The 2 seed was the Bears. They lost, but also the Eagles also lost as well. So the Eagles are in the number 3 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles. Carolina Panthers ended up getting in by the skin of their teeth into winning their division. They had to rely on another team in their division to actually win because it ended up being a three-way tie with a win for Atlanta on 8 wins, 9 losses during the season for them, for the Carolina Panthers, and for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay Buccaneers did win, but since Atlanta won, Carolina won twice against Atlanta. I think Atlanta obviously must have won against the Buccaneers at least one of the 2 games. So ultimately, the Carolina Panthers, by the skin of their teeth, even though losing on the same day that Seattle ended up winning and captured the 1 seed in the NFC, they played and they just got into the playoffs. So all those teams in 2, 3, and 4 in terms of the divisional winners will all be playing at home. So the games will be playing in Chicago, the game will be playing in Philadelphia, and the games will be played in Carolina. So with the seeding the way it is, the Green Bay Packers against their divisional rivals in Chicago Bears play in Chicago. Green Bay with the 7th seed. San Francisco 49ers will have to go to Philadelphia to play Philly. They were the 6th seed, and then the 5th seed, which was the LA Rams, which was the big thing, goes against the Carolina Panthers at Carolina. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, you would think the Rams should have the Panthers relatively well, but the other 2 games, obviously the Bears and the Packers played not that long ago. In fact, actually only played, I think, 2 weeks ago. And the Green Bay Packers did end up winning that game. San Francisco and obviously the Eagles, obviously played in the championship game a few times in the NFC, playing in the wildcard round. It's pretty crazy. Obviously, if I go onto the NFL website, does that start? I'm pretty sure that starts next week, the wild card round. And in fact, actually, they might not have the playoff picture fully functional right now on the AFC because they've still got 1 game to play tomorrow. Later today, at the time of recording. In fact, actually, is it today? Because it says it's Monday, but I'm not sure if that's my time or... Yeah, Sunday Night Football. Yeah, so that's the Ravens versus the the Steelers for the division there. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers are ahead by half a game at this point in the division, but whoever wins that game will win their division, end up being the 4 seed. But at the moment, in terms of the AFC, it's the Denver Broncos on the top. They won today, so they stay in top position. Second is Patriots, the New England Patriots. The 3 seed at the moment is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They end up winning. They're half a game in front of the Texans, who are in the 5th seed. The Bills are in the 6th seed, and the Chargers in the 7th seed. But with Seahawks, let's actually look at the playoff bracket. It hasn't been updated yet. Okay. So we won't know what the schedule is quite yet, but obviously we'll work it out coming in. But relatively well against Seattle. Seattle played really well, and their defense can hold a lot of teams. Like I said, they only scored 13 points, but held the team to 3 points, which is fantastic. Not much more can be said. It's a massive turnaround from last season. Obviously, I think we missed the playoffs last season. We didn't miss by a lot, but we did okay. And then obviously they just turned it around. Sam Darnold winning 14 games in a season for the 2nd season in a row. The only other quarterback that has ever done that is Tom Brady. So, pretty elite company there in that stat, which is crazy. and yeah, got the 1 seed after, and in fact, actually, he had a chance to get the 1 seed last year with the Minnesota Vikings when he won 14 games there, obviously playing against Detroit, and ended up losing that game. So they ended up losing the 1 seed, ended up going to the 5 seed, and yeah, being one and done themselves. So yeah, pretty interesting turn of events for Sam Darnold and obviously for the Seattle Seahawks. But fantastic result for them. The organisation's worked really hard this year to try and turn things around, and they have done so relatively quickly. But apart from that, obviously we've got a big week, obviously for Liverpool going up against Arsenal. We've got Melbourne Victory for the Wanderers men. We've got Perth Glory for the Wanderers women, and obviously we've still got the off season for the Giants and for the Titans. Obviously, a few things coming around. I think the Titans, just signed a new winger or centre that has been on the extended squad for the Sharks recently, and also Brian Kelly has been released from his last year on his contract to play for Parramatta. They in fact actually confirmed that today, so at the time of recording this. So yeah, so big changes coming for this team for the Gold Coast, and we'll see how they go, because there's a lot of things going into this season, and a few question marks over players like Tino. Obviously, Cleese Haas, I think, is off contract at the end of this year as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens around the league and around the team, but we'll see what happens with them. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care and go Seattle Seahawks.